Hello, and welcome to Eskemoz, where we dissect business decisions with the precision of a coroner examining a particularly nasty paper cut. Today, we're diving headfirst into the dumpster fire of bad decisions with a look back at the 5 biggest business flops of 2019. Think of it as a cautionary tale, a reminder that even those with more money than sense can make mistakes. So buckle up, grab your beverage of choice, and let's get this dumpster fire roaring. Alright, let's kick things off with a real head-scratcher, shall we? Picture this. You've just dropped a cool grand on a brand spanking new Apple monitor. It's sleek, it's shiny, it's so thin it practically disappears when you turn sideways. There's just one tiny problem: it doesn't actually stand up on its own. See, Apple, in their infinite wisdom, decided that the stand, the thing that prevents your $1,000 investment from becoming an expensive frisbee, would be sold separately for the low price of $999 US. I swear, you can practically hear the maniacal laughter echoing from the halls of Cupertino. Now, I get it. Apple's always been a fan of premium pricing, but $1,000 for a stand? That's not premium, that's just predatory. And the best part, the stand wasn't even that great. Reviews poured in about its wobbly nature and limited adjustability. It was as if Apple had gone out of their way to create the most overpriced, over-engineered, and over-criticized monitor stand in the history of mankind. The public reaction was about as subtle as a sledgehammer to a glass coffee table. Social media exploded with memes, jokes, and scathing reviews. People were building their own monitor stands out of Legos and coat hangers just to prove a point. But even for Apple, the $1,000 monitor stand was a step too far. It was a stark reminder that even the most successful companies can fall victim to their own hubris. Foldable phones, the technological equivalent of a mulleted haircut, ambitious, poorly executed, and ultimately destined for disaster. And no one learned that lesson harder than Samsung, with the launch of their highly anticipated, highly hyped, and ultimately highly embarrassing Galaxy Fold. Now, on paper, the idea was pretty cool. A phone that could unfold into a tablet? That's straight out of Star Trek. But the execution? Well, that was more like something out of a horror movie. Early reviewers quickly discovered a fatal flaw. The screen was about as durable as a soap bubble in a hurricane. It scratched, it flickered, it died a slow, agonizing death under the weight of its own ambition. It got so bad that Samsung had to delay the release, essentially hitting the emergency brake on a runaway train that was already halfway over a cliff. The problem? Well, it turns out that folding a piece of glass, no matter how thin or flexible, is still a recipe for disaster. The fallout was swift and brutal. Samsung's reputation, already bruised from previous mishaps, remember the exploding phones, took another major hit. The stock price took a nosedive, and the internet roasted Samsung harder than a Thanksgiving turkey. It was a humbling experience for Samsung, a reminder that even the biggest players in the tech world are not immune to the laws of physics or basic common sense. Now let's step away from the world of technology for a moment and delve into the equally messy realm of love, marriage, and multi-billion-dollar divorce settlements. Specifically, the $35 billion were getting divorced, but he's keeping the change settlement of Jeff and Mackenzie Bezos, which, and I cannot stress this enough, is an insane amount of money. We're talking Scrooge McDuck swimming in a vault of gold coins insane. To put that number into perspective, $35 billion is more than the GDP of some small countries. It's enough to buy you a small island nation, a fleet of solid gold yachts, and still have enough left over to fund a lifetime supply of avocado toast. And it was all up for grabs in the world's most expensive game of who gets the dog. The Bezos divorce ignited a firestorm of debate about wealth inequality, the power dynamics of marriage, and the fine art of negotiating a prenup. Because, surprise, surprise, when you're dealing with that much money, things get complicated. Politicians were calling for higher taxes on the ultra-wealthy. Economists were having public meltdowns on cable news. And your weird uncle who still uses a flip phone was suddenly an expert on marital assets. But beyond the financial circus, the Bezos divorce also highlighted the very real human cost of extreme wealth and ambition. It was a stark reminder that even with all the money in the world, happiness is not guaranteed. And while the details of their settlement remain largely private, one thing is for sure: the Bezos divorce will continue to be a topic of conversation for years to come. Now, let's talk about Hollywood, shall we? That magical land where dreams go to die and remakes are churned out faster than you can say box office bomb. In 2019, Hollywood, in all its infinite wisdom, decided to tackle the issue of gender inequality in the most predictable way possible by gender flipping a bunch of classic movies. Because apparently, the only way to empower women in film is to dust off an old script, swap a few pronouns, and call it a day. We got an all-female Ghostbusters, a female-led Ocean's 8, and a whole slew of other remakes that seemed less interested in telling new stories and more interested in cashing in on nostalgia and virtue signaling. It was a cynical move, a transparent attempt to capitalize on the conversation surrounding gender equality without actually doing the hard work of creating something original and meaningful. And the irony is, for every well-intentioned gender flip that falls flat, there are countless original stories about women, by women, that are struggling to get made. Stories with complex characters, compelling narratives, and perspectives that go beyond the tired tropes of the male gaze. The problem isn't the idea of gender flipping itself. It's the execution, the lack of creativity, the feeling that these remakes are more concerned with ticking boxes than with telling good stories. It's about time Hollywood realized that true representation goes beyond simply swapping genders. And finally, let's talk about WeWork, the poster child for startup hubris and the dangers of believing your own hype. WeWork, for those of you lucky enough to have avoided their aggressively millennial marketing campaigns, was a company that promised to revolutionize the way we work. They were going to take the soul-crushing monotony of the traditional office and inject it with kombucha on tap, beanbag chairs, and the vague promise of networking opportunities with other people who were also desperately trying to avoid actual work. It was like a college dorm room designed by a marketing executive who just discovered the word synergy. And for a while, it seemed like they were onto something. WeWork was valued at a staggering $47 billion, despite the fact that their business model seemed to be based on renting out office space for more than they were paying for it. It was like a game of financial Jenga, with each new lease agreement precariously balanced on top of the last, just waiting for someone to sneeze and send the whole thing crashing down. And crash it did. As WeWork geared up for its IPO, those pesky things called facts and financial statements started to emerge, and they weren't pretty. The IPO was scrapped, the CEO was ousted, and WeWork went from being the darling of Silicon Valley to a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked ambition and the perils of believing your own marketing BS. The WeWork debacle was a wake-up call for investors, a reality check for the tech industry, and a source of endless amusement for anyone who'd ever worked in a real office and wondered why we needed to reinvent the concept of a desk. So there you have it, 5 epic business blunders from 2019 that serve as cautionary tales for entrepreneurs, CEOs, and anyone who's ever had a truly terrible, no good, very bad idea. Because let's be honest, the road to success is paved with the wreckage of bad decisions. It's how we learn, adapt, and hopefully avoid making the same mistakes twice. Be sure to subscribe to Eskemoz for more insightful deep dives into the world of business, where we dissect the good, the bad, and the utterly ridiculous.